Yeah, we just finished both sections already have. We have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. There are 4 chambers in our heart. Two atria and 2 ventricles. Remember that blood always enters the heart into an atrium and leaves the heart out of a ventricle. So you go from atria to ventricle and then out in alphabetical order. And you've got a left atrium and a left ventricle, a right atrium and a right ventricle. If blood comes in on the left side, it's going to leave on the left side. Let's just assume, we'll just talk about adults for now. Right? If it comes in on the right side, it's going to leave on the right side. It doesn't cross over. Right? There are animals where crossing over can occur, but those are with animals that only have 3 chambers, so only have 1 ventricle. Not humans. All right. With these 4 chambers, and you could almost think of it as 2 hearts right next to each other. Right? There's the left heart and the right heart, and they happen to be right next to each other, smushed up together. With that, we can actually have 2 separate circuits of blood vessels, and we do, 2 separate systems. So we could think of the systemic circulation. The systemic circulation carries blood to and from most all of your body. And think about it as the main sort of body distribution of blood. And it gets its blood from the left side of the heart. So the left side pumps blood into the systemic circulation. The other one is the pulmonary circulation. It gets its blood from the right side of the heart. And pulmonary refers to our respiratory system, our lungs, which relates to the lab we're doing tonight and Monday.
Can you repeat the last part?
About the pulmonary circulation?
Yeah.
Yeah, pulmonary circulation receives blood from the right side of the heart, and it pumps blood out to the lungs. So the pulmonary circulation serves the lungs.
And it's like unoxygenated blood?
For half of it. Talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Make sure I go back to that.
Okay.
Okay, everybody got this down? Oh my gosh. Whew, okay. The doors aren't open. Should we open the doors?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just getting worse and worse. Those aren't going to stay open.
That one's open.
It's a fire hazard. That is open? Careful going up there. Make sure you come back on this side. Alright. Okay, so that exercise didn't help out at all, I don't think. Just so you know, we have sirens. Alright, so we've seen this picture before. And it's really emphasizing these 2 different circulations. Again, we've got the heart in the middle. It's got 4 chambers. Here's an atrium, a ventricle, a ventricle. And this is the right side of the heart. Remember, it's right and left compared to who owns the heart. So if it's my heart, that's my right side. That's my left side. All right, so blood comes into the right atrium, goes to the right ventricle, and then it comes out to the pulmonary circulation. It goes to the lungs. When that blood comes back, it comes back on the left side of the heart. Left atrium, left ventricle, and then it goes out to the systemic circulation, the rest of the body. Okay? And you can see by the way these are drawn, the left side of the heart, that ventricle, has really thick walls. It's a strong chamber. And it needs to be because it has to drive blood through almost the entire body. Where the right side just has to drive blood through the lungs. It's still a challenging task, but nowhere near as difficult as what the left side of the heart has to do. Okay. Some people get a little sort of misled by this diagram. In some ways you could almost assume that the left side of the heart pumps blood below the heart, the right side pumps blood above the heart. That is not the way it works, right? Because remember, your heart is sandwiched between both of your lungs. So the right side of the heart is going to pump blood above and below to all of your lungs on both sides. the left side of the heart, sure, it does pump blood below your heart, but it also pumps blood above your heart, to your arms, your neck, and your head. Okay? So the reason that's not shown here is because it's not trying to emphasize where all these parts are. Instead, it's trying to emphasize these two separate circuits. Everybody see that? Okay. The other thing I want to point out with this figure are the colors. Right? So we've got red and we've got blue on here, and there's even purple in there. Right? So it seems like a lot of us early on learned, this goes back to one of the, I told you about how I felt about the senses, right? About grammar school, and they tell you all these lies. Here's another lie that we were told. That red represents arteries and blue represents veins. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Yeah, well, get that out of your head. Right? That's wrong. That is not what those colors represent. And I can remember, it was a number of years ago when my younger daughter was in kindergarten, but we walk into her classroom, going to drop her off, hoping that she'll be able to play with her friends and not fall apart. Like, oh, don't leave me. And there's that whole thing. There's some trauma back there. Okay, so we go in, and I think it was February. It's like, Valentine's Day's coming, yay, heart stuff. And so on the door was this poster, and it was from the American Cardiac Heart or whatever Association. It's this official poster, and it's got a drawing of a person with a heart and all these blood vessels, and they're colored a pretty bright red and blue. And it was labeled, there was a little legend on the side, and it had a little red square, and it said arteries next to it. And it had a blue square, and it said veins next to it. And I almost ripped the thing off the door. I was so mad. I took a deep breath, I counted to 3, and said goodbye, and I walked away. And I never even told the teacher about it, which I should have. She wouldn't have cared. So what do the colors actually represent then? Good, you guys know this, right? Relative oxygenation. How well oxygenated the blood is. So the red vessels have well oxygenated blood. The blue vessels have poorly oxygenated blood. Not deoxygenated, because that suggests there's no oxygen in there at all, which is not true. There is oxygen in these blue vessels, it's just not as much as the red vessels. All right, so in the systemic circulation, we look, here's the left side of the heart, it pumps blood into the arteries. These arteries are all red. Right? So that's, you can see, okay, maybe that's where that whole thing came from, and so far, really, that works. Right? The red vessels, in this case, are arteries. The blood goes through the capillaries, the blood turns blue, it looks like, right? It went from red to purple to blue. And those veins carrying blood back to the heart are blue and poorly oxygenated. So in the systemic circulation, right, what we had learned originally actually works. We just got lucky that it works, right? Because when you look at the pulmonary circulation, the other half of the whole system, blood that leaves the right side of the heart goes into arteries. These are blue arteries. Right? Why are these poorly oxygenated? Because if you trace that blood back to the last capillaries, that's where we use the oxygen in all these different tissues. Why are we sending blood to the lungs? To get more oxygen. If they were already well oxygenated, why would we even bother sending them to them? And there are a number of animals that can divert blood away from the lungs if it is already oxygenated. They've got alternative ways to get the oxygen in there. You want to know about that? I'd love to talk about it, but we can't do it right now. All right, so that blood goes through the lungs. Now it's well oxygenated, and we've got red vessels. These are veins because they're carrying blood back to the heart, back to the left side. So they're red-colored veins. So sure, that red artery, blue vein thing works in the systemic circulation. It doesn't work in the pulmonary circulation. And that's not the intention of those colors. So going forward, those colors only mean about the relative oxygenation. So, are our arteries actually red and our veins actually blue in the systemic circulation? I mean, it looks kind of bluish, right? Kind of green, bluish.
Blood is red.
Blood's red?
Yeah.
Whoa, but that's not red.
Yeah,
So that blood must be.
That's the vein.
It's like those people that Flash Gordon. You guys know Flash Gordon?
Yeah.
Sorry, I went too far back. Okay.
The skin color plus color of deoxygenated blood makes it kind of green blue.
So you think this blood is green or blue?
No, our skin color plus darker blood color, both colors together kind of make it look like it's blue.
That's right. So the reason these vessels look like they're kind of greenish blue is the light from this room goes through the skin, through the wall of the vessel, hits the blood, bounces back. That red light gets absorbed. It's a lower energy light. It gets absorbed, and so what makes it back out is that bluish green color, and that's what we get to see. Right? So what color are the vessels actually? They're not red.
Brown, dark.
Kind of brownish. If it's an old cadaver, kind of gray because of the fixative agents, right? So the blood vessel itself is not going to be red, right? It's traditional organ color. It's kind of like a creamy, brownish, whatever color. The blood inside, no matter what vessel it's in, it's red. Right? Our blood is red. Yes, it can be different hues of red. Right? If it's well oxygenated, it's a brighter, more vibrant red. If it's more poorly oxygenated, it's going to be deeper, darker red. And that's actually the principle used for those pulse oximeters, right? Those little things you stick on the end of your finger. They can measure your heart rate, or your pulse rate, and the amount of oxygenation in your blood. What they're doing is they're shining the light into your finger, and the color of the light that comes back is going to vary depending on how well oxygenated your blood is. And so that's the principle that those things rely on. But your blood's red. Right? A lot of people think, oh, it's only red because when you cut it, it comes out, it's exposed to oxygen, and then it turns red. No. That's not true. It'll change the color of red, possibly, but... all right, are we done with this figure? I think so. Makes sense to you guys? Yes, move on. Don't talk about it again. All right, let's talk about blood flow in general. How are you going to get blood to move from one area to another area? Well, like fluids in general, any fluid, it is driven by pressure gradients. Seems like everything in this class is driven by a gradient of some kind. Even the simulation of knowledge is going up and down. Okay, so pressure gradient. It's going to go from high pressure to low pressure. Blood, like any fluid, gets squirted. Right? It's going to go from high pressure to low pressure. If we were to sort of map the pressures out through the cardiovascular system, starting where blood leaves the heart, going all the way through to where blood enters back into the heart, you can see that there is a steady decrease in pressure. Blood flows from arteries to capillaries to veins back to the heart. And the entire time we have a drop in pressure. Right? It goes from relative high pressure to low pressure. We'll talk later about why this fluctuates. But it's going from high pressure to low pressure. If there was a big dip and it actually jumped back up, the blood wouldn't flow through that section. It would cool then in that relative low pressure system. Right? So blood is always going to flow from high pressure to low pressure. And what determines that driving force really is the pressure gradient. The difference in pressure from one area to another. It's not the total pressure, it's the pressure gradient. And to get a better understanding of that, let's go ahead and look at these weird beakers. At the top, we have these double beakers connected with a little tube or tunnel, and they're, let's say, filled with water. And the beaker on the left, let's say that the water pressure in there at the bottom of it is at 100 millimeters of mercury. The water pressure on the right is at 60 millimeters of mercury. There's a pressure difference, right? And that pressure difference is what's driving the water to flow from the left side to the right side. What is that difference? It's 40 millimeters of mercury. Okay. Down here at B. Here, the height of the water in each beaker is the same. And so there is no change in pressure. And so there's no flow. Let's come down here. We've got a lot more water in the system. So on the left side, we're all the way up to 200 millimeters of mercury, twice the pressure that we had in the first one. And on the right side, it's at 160 millimeters of mercury, a lot more pressure there. We still have some flow, but the flow is at, in this case, 20 milliliters per minute, the same flow that we had at the beginning. Even though we have higher pressures down here, the flow is the same. The reason is not because of the pressures, but the pressure difference. The difference is still at 40 millimeters of mercury. That's what determines that driving pressure or driving force. It's the difference in pressure, not the actual pressure. Okay, questions about this? Yeah.
So it's about the pressure, why people like when you cut your vein here, say the person died like faster, I mean lose blood faster than if you cut like other places in the body?
So different vessels have different pressures. And so if you were to cut, something about potentially cutting vessels. Let's say you accidentally cut a vein, blood kind of oozes out. If you accidentally cut an artery, definitely don't do this. Blood doesn't ooze out, blood squirts out. And the reason is the blood in the artery is under a much higher pressure, which goes back to this figure here, right? So these arteries are at a much higher pressure than the veins. Veins have very low pressure, right? And so if an artery gets cut, blood's going to squirt out at a higher rate. It's got more driving force to squirt out. And now the pressure difference is really great because you have that high pressure in the artery that was going to a slightly lower pressure in a neighboring artery, but now it's going to the atmosphere as a very low pressure. So it literally squirts. And so you'll lose blood at a lot higher rate if an artery gets cut than if a vein gets cut. So all of these vessels you can see in my forearm, these are all veins. So your veins are more closely associated with the surface, where your arteries are deeper. You want to protect those arteries more, because if a vein gets cut, okay, that's a problem. If an artery gets cut, that's a really big problem. There are a few places in your body where arteries come close to the surface, like in your wrist.
I have a question. I went to the ER one day for something, and when the nurse tried to draw blood, he hit something and the blood actually shot out at him. So what would cause that?
Shot out at him.
Yeah, it actually shot out and it hit the floor and hit the bed and him. And so yeah, I don't know why. So
What did he poke you with?
A needle?
But there's nothing on the other end of the needle?
No. It was just he was trying to draw blood to see what was happening to IV or anything. And it literally shot out at him and on the floor.
Well, it must have hit an artery,
Wow.
or your veins are strangely high pressure. Yeah, because usually when you get a blood draw, they stick the needle in and they put those little vacuum canister things on the end, and that creates a really low pressure, which makes it even easier for veins to squirt blood, because now the pressure gradient is much bigger, right? Because it's even lower than atmospheric pressure, but it sounds like that wasn't the case.
No, he was just drawing blood and the whole tiny thing and it just shot out. Like he just pricked me and it just shot out. And I don't know why.
What emergency room is that? Where do I knock it?
It only happened
Don't
to
tell me.
him, but he's a, not a student, but he was a resident. Yeah, yes. My bird can't be, yes, he was a resident. He was in training technically, in a sense.
We're all in training.
Yes.
Tomorrow's day. You had something to add to that?
I have a question. The pressure in arteries is higher because blood is oxygenated, right?
No, because even the pressure in your pulmonary arteries is higher than in your pulmonary veins. So the reason that pressure is higher in those arteries is because it just came from the heart where it squirted all that blood out under a high pressure. And you need it higher there so that you have enough pressure to drive it all the way through the rest of the blood vessels. Yeah, you bet. Anything else? All right. So we talked about that. Pressure gradient. All right, what else influences blood flow? Resistance to flow. So this is another important aspect of it. So resistance to flow, it opposes flow. So the more resistance you have, the less flow you have through that vessel. Or another way to word it, increase resistance, you decrease flow. Okay, we got that? All right, so what are the parameters for resistance. What contributes to resistance? Well, here are a number of things. For one, if you increase the length of the vessel, you increase the resistance. So the longer a section that the blood has to flow through, the more resistance to flow there is. You have more pipe to shove it through. Well, do our blood vessels really change length? I mean, that sounds a little crazy.
Yeah.
You change the arteries in our neck? What's that? Diameter, that's going to be important, but that's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about the actual length of the vessel.
I think you're talking about distal relative from the bump.
Say that again?
I think you're talking about like how far is it from the pump?
How far is it?
From the pump?
Yeah, from the back. Yeah.
We could even just take any individual vessel, right? Let's say your aorta, right? That's your biggest artery coming out the left side of the heart. We can go all the way through the aortic arch. Can that actually get longer or shorter to change the resistance of flow?
They have something in the vein, like a valve when it's going, for example, upward, that's like a close the vein to go downward in the vein. It's like something in the feet area, you may have something like the doors when it,
Like a valve?
yeah.
The doors, valve, yeah. So we don't have valves in our arteries, but we do have valves in our veins. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But in an artery, we don't. But even in the vein, we're not changing, that doesn't necessarily change the length of the vessel, but that is helping to direct flow. All right, that helps ensure flow doesn't go backwards. What about the actual length of a vessel? Let's think of an example on that. Changing.
If you shunt off capillaries and things like that, you can change the length of the entire circuit.
You could change the length of the entire circuit, that's kind of, but then you're removing parallel circuits as opposed to shortening a serial circuit. So, kind of related, a little bit different.
Are you talking about like long-term or
Oh, whatever you want.
short-term? As a person grows?
There's an example. Well, don't regress about it, that's good. All right, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say if a person goes.
Ah, she stole your thunder.
Sorry.
You raise your hand first, everybody. You raise your hand first. Right. Yeah, so when you were born, all of your blood vessels were a lot shorter than they are right now. Right? 'Cause now you're a lot taller and everything grew proportionally. And so, yeah, your vessels do change length as you grow, and that's going to add resistance to flow through there. So does that mean your heart has to work harder? Well, yes, but your blood vessels also got larger in diameter, which we're going to see is a big influence on the resistance to flow. And also your heart's bigger and stronger, so it can handle all those longer vessels now. So, yeah?
Question, does it work the same way when you get older and you start getting a lot smaller because you're gaining bone mass, as you just start shrinking, do the length of your veins and other pieces?
I don't know that your blood vessels are going to get shorter necessarily. So yeah, as you age, not at this point when you're much older, you do start to lose height, and a lot of that is due to losing fluid in the little pads between your vertebrae, right? So that fibrocartilaginous, those discs that are between your vertebrae, they've got a lot of water in them and they get squashed and you don't fill them back up with water. And so if you decrease that distance between vertebrae just by a little bit between each one of those joints, that adds up to a significant amount of height reduction. But the associated vessels, I don't know that they are going to shrink in terms of length a significant amount, but I don't know that for sure. And that's mostly just in your vertebral column, so in terms of your limbs and so forth, it's not going to have an effect there. All right, but day to day, hour to hour, whatever, we're not changing the length of our blood vessels. We're stuck with what we've got, right? All right, what about viscosity? So the viscosity of the fluid, in this case blood. We should talk about what viscosity is. So viscosity is a measure of, you could think of it as sort of fluid stickiness or thickness. So if a fluid with more viscosity is going to be thicker and more sticky and not flow as easily. So picture different fluids with different viscosity. So let's think about water. You've got a glass of water and you pour it on the table, that water flows off the end, and it just ruined these devices, sorry. And it pours off the end pretty easily. let's say you have Carol syrup, right? Light corn syrup. I don't know what's light about this stuff, but you take corn syrup and you go ahead and pour it on, right? It comes out and then it kind of oozes a little bit, but it doesn't flow anywhere near as easily as the water does. Because that corn syrup acts as though it has a much higher viscosity. It's thicker, it doesn't flow as easily. Right? Whenever I think of corn syrup, I think of pancakes. I don't put it on my pancakes, but my dad does. So he'll always make the big pancakes. And then he puts Carol syrup. You guys know what Carol syrup is, right? Right. Carol syrup on, and then jam on top because it's not sweet enough. Puts jam on top of that, rolls it up like a giant taquito, and then starts eating it. And then my brother and I look at him, who's eating it? Leave me alone. And then he eats this thing. It's crazy. I don't know where he got that habit from. So I just pour an equal amount of actual syrup on. It's the same amount of sugar. All right. So viscosity, how thick the fluid is. So if you increase viscosity of your blood, you're going to have more resistance to flow. If it's thicker fluid, it doesn't flow as easily. It's harder to shove it or pump it through your blood vessels. Right? Does the viscosity of our blood change
Yeah.
after eating those pancakes, right? How's it going to change?
Blood clotting?
Greasy food?
Yeah,
All right, so what's greasy food going to do for it?
like they make it like a blood viscosity higher level, like oil in the blood, and sometimes they close the veins.
It can clog it up?
Yeah.
Or it can build up on the walls of your blood vessels and make them functioning smaller and smaller until they
Yeah.
block. Yeah, you eat a lot of high lipid content food. Those lipids get in your blood. Makes your blood a lot thicker, measurably thicker. Is there another hand that went up over here?
That was what I was.
Ah,
I was just gonna say,
you got the attention now. Hit it. What?
I was gonna say that just generally more stuff in the blood is gonna make it more viscous. So I was actually wondering if you're more dehydrated, is your blood gonna be more viscous because that water's gonna deep down?
Is that what you were going to talk about?
Yeah, like before you give blood, you're supposed to hydrate a lot 48 hours before, because if you don't, your blood might be too viscous and you can't donate the amount of blood you need in the time frame that is required.
There you go. Right. So your relative amount of hydration. Right? So if you're really well hydrated, you've got a lot of extra water in your body, which means you also have more water in your blood. If it's more water, then the concentration of all the stuff that's in your blood, like the blood cells and the proteins and the sugars, all that stuff, is more dilute. Right? Which means it's going to be a lower viscosity. Or if you are dehydrated, your blood gets thicker. You've pulled the water out but left all the other things in there. You get more concentrated, it's thicker blood. That's right. Somebody think of another way that your blood viscosity can change? The blood thinner. Okay, so how do blood thinners work? Do you know? I don't know how they work. Anybody know? Just add more water to the blood? I don't know. Same principle though, right? So another one I was thinking of is blood doping, right? So this is something that comes up with different highly competitive sports. So there are different ways of doing this, but sort of the general principle is you could take a sample of your blood out of your body will replace it, make more blood to replace that, and then later on put that blood back into your body, right? Or at least take the red blood cells and stick those back into your body. So now all of a sudden you did is you added a lot more red blood cells to your blood. Why would you want more red blood cells in your blood? Oxygen? Because they are oxygen? So you can carry more oxygen. So if you're highly competitive in some aerobically active sport, like, I don't know, bicycle racing, for instance, right? So if you're racing bicycles, it suck a lot of oxygen in to keep those muscles going. But if you can carry more oxygen, you have more oxygen available to those muscles, that can give you a competitive edge so that you can go a little harder for a little bit longer, right? And so think about that, well gosh, why don't we all just blood dope, right? What's the problem with blood doping? It's messy. Well, don't have the person she worked with in the emergency room do it.
High risk of infection.
What's that?
High risk of infection.
High risk of infection? Well, let's say we've got the sanitation part all worked out and things are sterile.
Can't your veins eventually drop if they're bothered too much?
they're bothered too much.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, you keep poking the same vein over and over again and they can collapse. That can be a problem. Let's say we're not doing this every week.
Are you getting at, like, the viscosity can get so high that your blood pressure spikes to unhealthy levels?
You keep adding more and more red blood cells to your blood gets thicker. The viscosity goes up, which adds more resistance to flow, which means your heart has to work harder to drive the same volume of blood through your tissues. Right? And some of these, if these are highly competitive sports, these extreme athletes, they're already, this is the extreme part, right? They're already pushing their body to the limit of what human bodies can actually do. And if you go ahead and tweak the system, you can very easily push it over the limit. And so if an athlete had some heart condition they didn't even know about, which for, assuming you're a normal mortal like me, for you and I, that would never even come up because we never push ourselves to that limit. But now these extreme athletes have, and if their heart's a little bit weaker in some way, well, it could say, you know what, this is ridiculous, you've done too much, I'm done, and it stops. And you're riding your bike and you're flying along, you got the yellow jersey, and all of a sudden, boom, you fell over and that's it. Somebody else grabs your jersey and keeps going. Not quite like that. But you can literally drop dead in the middle of one of these competitions because of the added viscosity of your blood. So don't blood dope. Okay? Do you have a question or a comment? No. Okay. All right. What's another parameter? The radius of the blood vessel. If you increase the radius of the blood vessel, you decrease the resistance. The wider the vessel, the easier it is to shove blood through. Right? Just think about a pipe, you're trying to send water through it. If it's a really big pipe, it's easier to send more water through. If it's a really skinny one, you've got to shove hard to get the same amount of blood through. Okay? Yeah?
Can you think, I mean, of course, like certain hormones, right? Like what is it called?
Vasoconstrictors and vasodilators?
Yes.
Mhm.
Can you do that? Like, does your body have these mechanisms? Are they only driven by hormones to be able to do that? Like, to get them bigger and stuff?
It could also be through neurons.
Temperature change. If you're cold.
I'm just thinking about.
Yes, but then, so that's sort of the original stimulus for that change, but that gets acted on through the endocrine and the nervous system. Right?
Like, I'm just thinking about, because, like, let's say you increase the viscosity of your blood, then, like, does the radius of your blood vessels do not get bigger? They cannot get bigger, or can they?
So number 3 here is the one that we have the most control over.
Oh.
So we can change